Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at two important stories. The first is in reference to Pakistan's path to economic recovery, which of course is underway with regards to the new government putting in measures and taking a look at the new direction that the country is going to be taking in moving forward. There is of course also the World Economic Forum that is taking place where the Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif is also attending, and in the plenary discussion, the meeting of course attended by the Prime Minister, he also addressed the audience with regards to what is the need of the hour, particularly of Pakistan, and then of course with regards to the ever-changing economic climate. He stressed the importance of the kind of reforms that are needed at home, and particularly with regards to the power sector that needs improvement. He talked about how a number of measures have been taken by the government in order to improve this perspective, and also with regards to relationship with important countries that have helped in this regard, namely of course Saudi Arabia most importantly, and others including the UK. There is of course discussion also with regards to what exactly will be the next steps for Pakistan in terms of its engagement with the IMF. The good news of course is that the standby arrangement of course has been completed, and with reference to the last tranche that was supposed to come in has also been confirmed by the State Bank of Pakistan. But what now lies ahead is of course another negotiation with regards to another extended fund facility with the IMF, and what exactly will be the factors to contribute to this discussion. How exactly will the government be able to take a hold of this discussion with regards to austerity measures and poverty alleviation at home, dealing with reforms regarding particularly the energy sector, as the Prime Minister himself mentioned, and then of course the tough decisions that the government has to take previously as well, and even now moving forward, sometimes at the cost of its own political future, with regards to helping the economy and putting the country on the right direction. And then of course the budget is also looming, and then there is also the impact with regards to climate change that we're going to be taking a look at more closely in the next segment too, where how exactly will this be impacting the way Pakistan is going to count the kind of aspects that are important in the economic recovery discussion, and what sort of data analysis and data points need to be gathered in order to understand moving forward what aspects are going to be considered, and how those calculations are then going to be meted out in a way that actually benefits the population and protects the country from the potential of climate-induced disaster that of course it is already facing. So that's going to be the focus of our show today with regards to economic recovery and climate change. And for this and more, as always in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Raja Faisal. Farooq Badafi is unfortunately not with us here today, but we have been joined online by Dr. Khaqan Najeeb, a senior economist. Thank you very much, Dr. Khaqan, for joining us and being on the show. It's a pleasure to have you. Today, of course, we're going to be taking a look at what is happening in the background of the World Economic Forum, and then of course the Prime Minister's address earlier as well with regards to what sort of direction the country actually wants to set foot in. And now with the standby arrangement completed, what do you think in terms of the kind of rhetoric, at least, that we're getting in, and the kind of decisions that the country is moving towards in terms of both the government and then, of course, in particular, the Finance Ministry and then the SIFC as well, with regards to where we're stepping ahead?
So, Sana, if we take a look back 9 months when we were struggling with the 22nd facility with the IMF, which itself was an extended fund facility, and then Pakistan had to kind of opt out of that facility as we couldn't complete the ninth review. Things looked quite murky. There was macro instability in terms of rising inflation, the current account getting out of whack. You also saw the rupee gyrating and weakening. And then came a new engagement with the IMF, which is a standby engagement. They also saw that Pakistan was going through a period of election, which is going to be 6 to 9 months. And so we got a facility with them that has, alhamdulillah, worked in the sense that the country has behaved as economies typically behave when they engage with the IMF. What does that mean? Our current account has come down in the first 9 months to a deficit of $500 million for this fiscal year. If I compare the same with the last fiscal year, we were at $4.1 billion. Our inflation has tapered, which means the way prices were rising at about 38% in May 23. to nearly 20% in the last month. And when we see the April figures, I think they're going to be near 17, 18%. And more importantly, the core inflation has tapered to under 16%. For people, that may not be a great respite because they still face the rise in prices, albeit at a slower pace. Thirdly, our reserves today at 8 billion after making a payment of 1 billion without creating any ripples in the sea of our bonds, of our FX market, or our Pakistan Stock Exchange. So, that's been the impact. Now, largely or broadly, Sana, we call that macro stabilization. The consequent effect of all the adjustments is, of course, on the growth. The growth has slowed down. Large scale manufacturing has been negative for the first 9 months data that we have, or rather, I think it's the 8 months data. But the agriculture has played out well. The wheat crop is bumper. All the other crops have recovered from the floods that we hit last year. Cotton is better, sugarcane is better. Even the sugarcane people are talking about exports. They've been asking the government. So there is a 5% growth in the agriculture in the first half. So that's kind of supported the slowing in the other sectors, especially the manufacturing. I think that's Pakistan's story. Pakistan's got a breathing space without the overhang of macro instability or the overhang of a default like situation. From here onward, how we build this story is again up to us. We have two important decisions that we need to take. One is how do we present a budget which is good enough to set the tone for the next coming years, and how the expenditure and the taxation would look, and secondly, how we engage with the fund for the 24th facility. But I always say this with, a little bit of sorrow that I have to again say, as I did when we spoke in June, and I distinctly remember that we did, that prudency right now even kind of hints to the fact that we remain engaged with the doctor of the ICU.
Yeah.
And I use this word especially so that the people understand that the economy is still in difficulty, and that's why we are engaging with the doctor of the ICU. And the main reason for that engagement is that over the next few years, the kind of international financing flows that are needed for Pakistan in terms of reprofiling our debt, 10, $11 billion, and another 5 to 10 billion incoming, recycling, maturing debt, and then the current account deficit that we need would put us in the ballpark of average $25 billion to handle. Without an IMF umbrella, that would be hard to handle. Secondly, the IMF umbrella also ensures that all the other people who give us money, the multilaterals, the bilaterals, and the friendly countries have more comfort with us. And that kind of helps us in the other conversation that you had, that when we go abroad and we pitch Pakistan as an investment destination, we can say that we are again with the fund and are also making efforts on our own, albeit it's a difficult effort, whether it's privatization, deregulation, or liberalization. But we are still sincere to do so. The fund also kind of believes so. The fund statement, which is on the IMF website, not only you and I can read it, but anyone sitting in Saudi Arabia at the time the premier and his team are there can go and read. It's a pleasant statement to read. It talks about Pakistan's efforts as the fund thinks they have been in the last 9 months to a year now, and the kind of work that has been done to create this stabilization, albeit the risks still remain there, which will always be there till we correct our fundamentals. But that macro stabilization has given us the space not only to do the structural part, but kind of help in stabilizing prices on a downward trajectory, and hopefully then ease the way we do business, and so that in the coming year or so we can also look at the growth part again. When I say all these things, I am still uncomfortable with Pakistan's energy sector, with Pakistan's fiscal deficit, with Pakistan's deregulation effort to get growth going. These are three things that still should be there, and the fund does not necessarily comes deep enough to correct these. So these are still things that we have to do on our own in an environment where oil is still hovering at $89 a barrel. It was $75 a barrel. Go back, 6 months or so. So it's not an easy environment on the global side also. One more thing that policymakers must always remember: on the US side, we were talking about 6 rate cuts. I trade the global markets, I do research, and I support funds which trade internationally. We were talking about 6 rate cuts from the 5.25% that Fed has. Today, we are talking that there may be a rate cut within this calendar year. So, inflation is sticky abroad. So, economies have to be still kept on the slower path. That's the global picture Pakistan faces. So,
Exactly.
muddling through all this would be the policies makers' biggest challenges, as we have discussed.
Right.
Yeah.
Dr. Khaqan, you talked about and you refer to the IMF as an ICU doctor, and it seems that we're quite a stubborn patient to keep coming back to the ICU. I would think that it's a temporary place for critical care and that we'd be out. But what's really going on here? What's happening? Is it that we're not really following the doctor's advice? What actually brings us back to the same situation? You mentioned right at the end, and that's interesting because I wanted to explore that further, that there's a lot that we need to do on our own as well. But isn't there perhaps a framework or a strategy or a prescription that can be provided to us by the IMF at this point that just lays it down for us that these are the necessary do's that must be undertaken for economic recovery to happen? And this is the pathway. I mean, they have that sort of visibility, and they have that position to just make us understand, okay, here are the steps that you need to do. And I understand there's also capacity of issues of capacity and will, but even if we put that separately, is it that we are not we don't have enough information on what are the right steps, or it just says that we have that advice but we're not doing it?
So, in a helpful manner, I'm going to say this, that yes, we are now keen to enter the 24th facility, but that's not an SBA. That's not a standby arrangement to ride you out of anything. That's an extended fund facility. Pakistan has never ever completed an extended fund facility besides the one we completed in 13-16. And the reason I know that for a fact is that the same government, the same PMLN people, and I anchored that program with a very, very core team of both the bureaucracy and the professionals, and we completed that. Never ever have we done the complete 12 reviews. Last program in June, we had done 9 and we opted out. I think we had done 8. The ninth didn't get complete. So that is very, very important. Sana, even what the IMF wanted you to do, we always left it halfway.
Okay.
It was always that we didn't even follow that prescription to the core. We did so in 16. Our reserves were at $24 billion at the time. Then there was all the political turmoil. Then, one government going out, the prime minister leaving, and things went sour. But that's a different story to write. But we had risen our, just if FX is one of the stabilization measures, we were at $24 billion. We were covering more than 3 months of our imports. So one thing is that we haven't followed through with the fund. Then fund is never going to be able to solve the operation theater issues. So here's the ICU doctor. Open your market exchange rate. Use that as an instrument so your imports are controlled. Do the pricing changes so that your liquidity issues are solved. get the taxes which you can do in 1 to 2 years so that you can jack up your tax rate. It would not do a fundamental reform of the tax structure. Sana, that's for us to do. It's for
Yeah.
us to think that we don't do our provincial taxes right. Our provincial taxation is 0.8% of GDP. They have not only the agri tax, the urban immovable tax, the services tax. That's paltry in amount. They should be collecting much more. At the federal level, FBR's 9%, then another 1% here and there. 10% tax to GDP. We wrote in the NFC we would take this to 15% in 2015. I talked to you in 2024 at 11%. So fund would not go deep and say the administratively how you need to run FBR. I'm going to be open, and I know I'm on PTV, but still, you cannot change six FBR chairpersons in 5 years. If you are not going to give comfort to him or her, share with him or her how you want to structure the FBR. These are the serious issues. We've now taken a bit of cognizance, and I'm saying this because we've just removed, grade 21 and 22 officers, I think 25 in total. So these are things that we need to be cognizant of. How we need to digitize the FPR. The IMF is not going to come and do that for us. So it's IMF's stabilization through the pricing changes, the policy changes that they can do in the first and the second year, because by the third year the program's coming to an end, but we never make it to the third year mostly. So that's the other part. But these are the deeper changes. You need to talk to your FPR team and say Pakistan's indirect taxation is at 70%. That's not acceptable. You need to talk to them that we just launched a Tajir scheme. Let me now talk about this. How can it be that we were targeting 3 million people and the end result is a few hundred people? Where did we go wrong? That's not for the IMF to come and tell us. I know that retail and wholesale is what 18% of my GDP and a paltry income, and a couple of lakhs of registered people in the income tax. So where did I go wrong? Did I ask people, the 3 million people, to get registered without doing my due diligence? Did I not contact the trade bodies? Did I not tell them what will be the consequences? Maybe I went with advanced tax regime. Maybe I had to go with a fixed tax regime. So all these things, getting Pakistan back on track would be a lot of hard work in and out of the IMF, both what you do with the fund and then what you do outside the fund. You know, we started with a big FDI number. Now I'm glad that we are talking to Saudi Arabia on a $5 billion platform. Let's showcase something that we can do: a project, a sale, a investment, a joint venture, a collaboration, a global value chain, anything uh, beyond G2G, what we are able to do. Small steps, but these are all the steps that we have to take. So, Sana, design of the program now itself becomes very important, right? I wrote a paper in on 13th of March 24 in the News International, the newspaper, and I said, you have to think if you're ready to go to the IMF. If we again go to the IMF, we first remember our past, that we have not been able to complete a fund facility, the 3 year besides the 13-16. So what lessons were taken from that? I think a big lesson was large part of writing the MEFP. We were sitting at home and doing it. We were very, very well prepared. So I've put down 12 principles on the same lines that I used to put for the 13 team. So these are real hard work tasks. You really need to do all these tasks and then get the top echelons of the bureaucracy, the political leadership to really, really understand this. And they have to be minutely executing. So both the design of the program, then the execution will become important. So I give the Tajir example here. Maybe there is a design flaw, maybe an implementation flaw. I think it's a bit of both that we need to fix. But we learn and we move on. These things are difficult. It's just been shown to you by the fact that only a couple of hundred have registered. So people's social contract of paying tax is also not there. It's not only the government's responsibility, but if the people feel they can enjoy the defense of the country, enjoy the street light of Pakistan, enjoy the hospitals of Pakistan, and not pay their due share, then the state must come hard on those people. So this is the whole ambit of where we are operating. And then, one thing that we have learned very carefully is for the government to, this time think differently. And think differently that you need to get out of a lot of businesses. You can't be doing a lot of businesses. Here I give another example that's just going on. Maybe we did import a lot of wheat. I agree. Then maybe our data was flawed. Why was the data flawed? What data was presented? I always say that decisions are taken on the data that is presented to me on the file.
Of
If we
course.
did import a lot of wheat, we must realize that there is a business we don't do. It's the rice business. Mashallah, Pakistan exported $3 billion of rice. There is no government intervention there. So the government has to start thinking what is it possible for it to do and what it should not be doing and letting the private sector do, preparing the private sector to do, propping up the private sector to do. So there is a lot to do in the next 3 to 5 years to get Pakistan back on track on sustainable basis. I am not sure we've put the competence together to do all this because
Okay.
I look at this, what I see happening with a with a very careful eye, and I see every action where they are being taken. So we have to take these actions differently this time. The fund won't be easy, Sana. They will ask you to review the NFC. They would ask you to come down hard on the pricing changes that are already with the regulators. These things will be problematic. These things will be hard to do. So we must do our contextual based homework so well, where we can tell them what are the efficiency changes we can make so that the prices don't fall hard on the people. Yes, we did do this SBA, but it came with the price of a slowdown in our growth. It came with a price that we had to hike the gas and the tariffs so high
Yes.
that inflation stayed sticky. People in 29% inflation in 23 and 25% in 24. That's hard for the people of
Yeah.
Pakistan. Just put those two numbers, if you add them, for a lot of people that must have caused a lot of hardships. That 54% price hike in just 2 years that people have seen. That's the
Absolutely.
scenario.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Dr. Khaqan, obviously, if we look at the economy of Pakistan for last 2 years, of course, Pakistan has been struggling to cope with it, and we have finally steered it out of the clouds, and now it is on a sort of smooth ride. If we look at the economies of the world, the basic principles they follow is that they always try to show confidence in the economy. Probably this is what our current finance minister he is doing. He is showing confidence in the reforms which has been taken in our economy, and further down they are going to take as well. Plus, if we talk about decision to go for another of the program, the fresh program, $6 to $8 billion, which we are already planning, can we say that this is a proactive approach to further cement the gains which we have made in our economy, number one? Or number two, we can say that it is the overconfidence which we are showing right now?
So I think you've put it rightly. Making the right pronouncements, giving the right signals, gives confidence to any economy. But they have to be always backed by the fact that you also, as I say, small little thing that you have to get right. Then you showcase to the people that here's FDI of 500 million and something, right? That has to, because people who are smart like me, they know that since 2019 we've been struggling with the Saudis. But if even we get something in Recordec, we get something on the agriculture, we showcase something that they've actually believed in, putting some money, that would, set a different tone. So where the pronouncements are very, very important, giving confidence that we are at it, we've put in $33 billion worth of project, SIFC's done its work, the finance ministry is doing its work. Then you have to also prove that we got the Tajir scheme right? I mean, that's very important. On the funds engagement, you have to have clarity that we go to the fund, we don't delay, so that there are no gyrations in the market. There is no, and the word you used rightly, cements the macro stability that is there. no doubt about it. But the design of the program, Faisal, is the most important thing. I mean, beyond any stretch of imagination, what we are going to do on the fiscal side, what we are going to get our growth going, what are we going to do on the energy side, both gas, power, and deeper changes. The fund has increased the prices. The circular debt is increasing at the same pace. That's not a good story to write. Here, the fund's expertise is limited. So you have to really, start thinking. Till now, no one has been able to, get a handle on this. On the other hand, the circular debt on the gas sector has increased. So these are very, very serious issues. Pakistan's tax to GDP is 9% of FPR on the FPR side, persistent over the 10 years. We've seen a completion of a fund program. We've seen one, program run to 8, reviews, and then we've seen the standby. We are still at the same place. So that means something much, much deeper has to be done. I just give you an example, right? I mean, someone just asked me to write a note on this Tajir scheme. So there are, I always say, that, there are many good things that we've done in Pakistan. You want to get the Tajir scheme right. You have so much data that you should have collated. It's not about just digitizing Pakistan. A lot of Pakistan is digitized, right? You have Nadra data, you have power bills, you have gas bills, you have access to bank accounts, you have access to my travel accounts. Okay, as a sole trader, let's say I was a sole trader of, selling laptops maybe. You have all this data. Now, you must use that data to come hard on me if I'm not registering. So it's not only digitization of Pakistan, it's how you use that data is more of an issue. I mean, Nadra is so data rich. I mean, and then all these people do transactions in the bank. I mean, there are lots of transactions happening outside, but there is, these transactions happening there. So the data mining to conduct tax gap analysis, these are serious professional works that must be done within the FPR or outside. So you're right. So design of the program would become very, very important. And then the issues of privatization as a whole. We've not started even talking about privatization beyond PIA. And please remember, Faisal, PIA has been on the list of very active privatization. And I will take a 10-second to tell you a story. In 2015 or something, same program, PIA was written, we were moving ahead. The then finance minister called me and said, I've spoken to the high-ups, we're all on the board, let's get PIA2 registered. The PIA2 that we registered right now to put the bad assets. That night, I got a company registered called Pakistan Airways. And I remember that we didn't have funds from the government to register that company. I gave 20,000 from my own pocket. I distinctly remembered. So I had the certificate and I handed him that certificate in the morning that this company has been registered with a board of directors. Let's now move on. It's taken since 2015 to 24, 9 years, and we are still doing the same thing, albeit we are moving this time. So all the other privatizations are there. Just think, on the discourse, privatizing or concessions or, selling a part of the company, there are so many hurdles there. You need the highest rated privatization commission in the world to do this. HR expert, financial experts, a privatization chairperson who understands all these things. These are serious issues. I don't want the nation to believe in Pakistan, but also we need to showcase that we've done something.
Right. Dr. Khaqan, I want to actually elaborate a little bit on PIA and the aspect of privatization as well, because, of course, as you've mentioned, this is something that's been talked about so many times before. Somehow it seems that there is some sort of movement on this front, but the story that you've told, of course, is worrisome. But I want to understand then, in your perspective, do you feel that even now it's just another conversation that has begun and will not see its end, or do you think that there is a chance of success given what our situation is? And will one privatization, and I understand different, of course, SOEs will be completely different in terms of how we actually engage with them, but will one privatization lead to some sort of ease or some sort of effect that brings forth others on board too?
And Dr. Khaqan, if you can allow me, of course, when we're talking about PIA's privatization, there are already, fake news circulating on social mediums, and of course, many big names, they are, propagating against the government as well, saying that there are different assets of PIA that are being sold and given away on very cheap prices. How can we maintain, or how the government can maintain the transparency in this context, showing to the world, showing to the people at large that this is not the case. In fact, the assets are being sold and delivered to people, at a very good rate.
So, I mean, let's think this through, right? One, PIA is easier to do because it's an isolated one. It's not connected to wheeling or, selling electricity in anywhere. So, that's one thing. The other thing is a lot of work has been done on PIA for a number of years. I think it was Dubai Islamic Bank, which was the lead manager then, or one of the managers who had, come up with bifurcation and all these plans. So we understand PIA. Third, our hand has been forced, Sana. I mean, 800 billion rupees. I think at that time it was 300 billion or something when to pick up. Now the liabilities were 800 billion. Out of that, what 250 was the direct liability of the government that the government had to pick up. We are paying 32 billion rupees every year on the 200 odd billion that we've picked up on the exchequer. It's not a cheap privatization by any stretch of imagination. In 10 years, if we maintain that money, we would have paid 320 billion rupees as markup. You and I have to pay that money through the budget. So, think through where we've brought the country, where we've brought these organizations. Obviously the government or the state or we as citizens are taking, the brunt of this. Number two, our hand has been forced. What, 30 odd aircrafts, 15 working, 100 billion rupee loss this year. If we hadn't done anything, we would have run out of fuel and money, and PIA would have been, halted. That's the other thing. And the third thing is that PIA still has those air services agreement. I think 90 to 100 routes, landing rights. Those are the real values. Then there are the underlying values. The properties it holds within Pakistan, the properties of in PIA holding, where of Roosevelt and Scribe. I lived in Paris. I was working in Paris for the last 1.5 to 2 years. And Scribe was a hotel where we would always take a walk. It's right downtown. We didn't live much far from that, and we'd look at it and say, we own this property, and we took a lot of photographs there. Faisal, you're right. The valuations of all these have to come through. We have to be not only transparent, but we have to get these valuations right, because a lot of modeling can be used. PIA's potential, point to point, 250 million people, a middle class which is, working across the world. There are 10 million Pakistanis abroad. A lot of people want to travel direct. So what is the real value of PIA, all these air services agreements and the routes we have? What is the value of the assets? What are we going to maintain? That's not an easy thing. That's why I say you need to have state-of-the-art people in the privatization commission. You want to sell assets worth billions of dollars, hire people with million rupee salaries, which can get this work done in-house, so that there is no opposition. But then there are people who don't agree with this kind of work, right? They don't agree that private sector should be running these and these should be with the state. That's a different thought process altogether. I think generally more lean towards the fact that state operations in our country at least have not been successful. The state does not have the capacity to run even small little anything. We can't even run utility stores without causing bad quality and the kind of rumpus that gets created. So we have to think about it. That doesn't The only consolation I can give those people is that if PTCL is doing well today, they are 74 or 76% owners. We've only sold 26%. The government owns 74%. If the value of the share has gone up, our value has gone up. Maybe, that's the only comfort I can give them.
Yeah, Dr. Khaqan, you are someone who's obviously keenly looking at the economies of the world, and of course yourself sitting in Australia, one of the booming economies of the world, and we know that when the countries, they attract FDIs, they attract the investments, they always make the feasibilities so that, you know, the all of the money is not getting docked on only on one side or getting invested only on the one side. Of course, they create the feasibilities and they have the right people to have you know, feasibility on the paper, and how much money can go in this sector, how much money can go in that sector, and what are the sectors, and then their classifications and each and everything. They have the plans. But of course, when we talk about you know, Pakistan, you have closely watched how things work here. I mean, I met somebody last week. We were having a cup of tea, I won't name, and he said that Saudi Arabia, they are ready to put money through. They are ready to put money through. Every year they want to, of course, invest $5 billion in Pakistan. But the biggest problem is that the people who are supposed to create the feasibilities, because whoever is going to invest in our country, of course, they are going to go through the feasibility sheets as well. Them people, the right people, they are not you know, at par. They still have old traditional sort of ways, and they don't understand that in the modern economies, what are the further avenues that can be explored to enhance the volume of the economy. Would you please you know, highlight how it works?
And Dr. Khaqan, I must warn you, Faisal has cups of teas with lots of people, so it could just be about anyone in this country. But let me also add to this with regards to how other countries are also viewing investment options in Pakistan, and I'd focus on Saudi Arabia, since this is something that's being emphasized a lot these days as well, and of course within the SIFC as well, and the Prime Minister in Riyadh too. But I want to understand, why is it that we haven't really seen something on the table yet? Do you think it's just a matter of time, or are there some other factors that are being considered?
Look, I mean, investment into any country requires a number of things, right? Macro stability. Can they take their funds out of Pakistan? I mean, now we have allowed repatriation of over $800 million in the first 8 or 9 months of this fiscal year. Go back last year, we had only let $200 million flow out. Actually, people called me from Pakistan who were running airlines in Pakistan and were asking me, because I travel, so you know, some of the managers, I don't get the liberty to sit with the high ups as Faisal does, but one of the managers is a friend, and he said, you know, Doc, we can't get our money out, and I said, it's hard for the state bank to be easy right now. So, you know, just think about it. Macro instability, and here we are not letting people take our monies out. And then it's a fact, right, that many pharmaceutical companies left Pakistan, Eli Lilly and some others. Then it's a fact that Telenor was a good company, it left Pakistan. So here's a picture. Now the picture is slightly turned. There is macro stability in the country. IMF has come through. So the macro is settled. Now we need to ensure that what we did when His Royal Highness was here in 19, and there was talk of, you know, 18-20 billion dollar refinery. That project has probably gone, you know, way past its age or something. We can't have a normal refinery, maybe a petrochemical refinery, but not the normal refinery, because I think we are moving to EVs and, you know, other vehicles. So there is a shelf life of a project, right? There is an economic value proposition that you have to put through. The old school bureaucracy that Faisal has rightly mentioned is not aware of these concepts. All the countries that have done well, like ours, I'm always very proud to have been trained in Australia. I'm not an American trained economist, because Australia 35, 40 years ago was in the same position as we were. They had the same issues. Banks were run by the state, Telstra, PTCL run by the state, water run by the state, energy run by the state, and they had mines and minerals, and they had agriculture. It seems like a Pakistan story, right?
Yeah.
It was exactly a Pakistan story. That's why I can see so clearly that what do I want to see Pakistan? I want to just, India, Australia, these are, examples which have been able to do. Australia, much more, of course. So they have, this board called Foreign Investment Review Board. Many of my colleagues from PhD work there. So, they review these projects within days. These are all people who've been to University of Sydney or University of New South Wales with us. They're finance gurus. They give clearance. Do you have such people at the board of investment? Think about it, right? Really think about it. That's the kind of value propositions that you need to create. SIFC has put together, I'm told, I don't sit with all the big boys of the country like Faisal, but some people we talk to, that they've put 28 to 33 billion dollars of projects. But it's not just a project presentation. The depth of the project, these people who work in Saudi Arabia or in the Middle East, they are very, very smart people, because they have the liberty to hire the world's best at the world's best salaries, whether they're Western trained or trained wherever. So they can see through the projects very quickly. So now we will see that can these projects deliver the kind of value proposition that attracts people to come and actually put their money in Pakistan. And here's another take on this. For people to understand very easily, I always give this example. Look, you can't have investment in Pakistan which comes, digs Pakistan's soil, gets Pakistan's water, bottles it, sells it to us, and wants to take the dividend away. I don't think that story anymore. You want Pakistan's investment which exports, which does technological transfer, which creates employment, which moves Pakistan to mechanization, and a foreign investment which doesn't get repatriated in the immediate. These are serious issues we need to grapple with.
Absolutely. Dr. Khaqan, I also want to just lastly talk a little bit about climate change. And of course, this is a major factor in terms of the discussion towards economic recovery, and we talked about it a lot in 2022. And I understand the kind of momentum it led to on international platforms with the loss and damage discussions and the promises of helping the developing world, including Pakistan. But of course, that hasn't also amounted to actual tangible action yet. So I want to understand, especially in terms of the budget looming, how are we even calculating what we need? How are we actually figuring out what steps do we need to take? Do we have the data points for that? Are we able to analyze where is it that we stand on this front? What is the potential of the disasters? And how is that factoring in our conversations both at home and with the IMF?
And Dr. Khaqan, where is the money that was promised to Pakistan?
So, you have to have good institutional memory like Faisal does. So the first question to start is that you put up these projects, you convinced the international community and countries and multilaterals that 9 to 11 billion dollars altogether, maybe reduce it to 8, 5, 6, 7, would be the kind of projects that we need to secure Pakistan's assets if there was another disaster, first of all. So let's do an institutional review, and I think we will find out that the amounts that came in have not secured what we needed to secure. That would probably be the best place to start. A country starving for dollars should have been putting up projects. So where did the planning commission go wrong in not being able to attract the kind of monies into these projects? And then the planning commissions of all the 4 provinces. There are always 5 governments working when it comes into development into Pakistan, right? So that's the first question. And the question will always end up on only one thing, that when you put competence together, you get the result. I keep saying this till we get, the competent set of people to handle these things, then, lose sight, and then we are looking for new monies. Sometimes I think people in Pakistan forget the institutional memory. There was Geneva, those 9-11 billion dollars. There is again Saudi Arabia, we are still asking for money. There is Washington, we are still asking for new monies. So did we fully utilize? I really hope that someone from the government will meet Faisal and say that here's $9 billion, we've got the $9 billion. That would set the stage to prove that what we promised with the international community, they have delivered and we have delivered. And we have secured Pakistan. So that would be my first point of view here. And then secondly, of course, has climate affect been seen in Pakistan, where it is, whether it's in terms of water, rains, other areas, the kind of AQIs that we are seeing in cities where Lahore, my dad tells me, sometimes is at 400, competing with Delhi to be number two worst polluted city in the days and winters. So really, I mean, again, we don't need to go and ask for monies. Maybe we need to redesign Lahore. I mean, that's something we need to do. We need to move on to, public transport. That is the only way to take the cars out. There is no other way. Maybe we need to go on 4 days working in winters. I mean, serious issues. Again, all this requires research and thinking, which we have to also take back. And I also, on the
Absolutely.
competence, always say that maybe just the last comment is that we've kind of outsourced our thinking to the multilaterals and the consultancies. I think all
Yeah,
this work can be done within Pakistan.
Absolutely, you're
true,
absolutely right, Dr. Khaqan. And I think
true,
another
true.
thing that we need to do is you and I need to sit with Faisal and his friends for a cup of tea, but
Sure.
perhaps next time.
Next time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khaqan. Always a pleasure
Thank
having
you,
you on the
Dr.
show. Thank you, Faisal, for being part of the debate. As always, that's all that we have time for. We're going to now see you tomorrow.